Hello, everyone, and welcome to 18-Minute Experts, the podcast that dives into the minds of industry leaders in the wonderful world of group benefits. I'm your host, Matthew Butters, and today I'm joined by an industry thought leader who has some incredible experience and insights on the subject of moving beyond generational labels when designing group benefits plans. And, I will say, our first guest to ever drop an Einstein quote on 18-Minute Experts. But before we jump into the conversation, a quick reminder to our listeners. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. You can also catch us at www.peoplecorporation.com/18minexperts. If you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review. Your feedback guides us as we try to provide the best benefits-focused content for you. Now, grab your headphones and let's jump in. Good morning, and thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited about this conversation. We're diving into a topic that's kind of been thrust to the forefront of a lot of benefits-related conversations, how we design group benefits plans, and more importantly, how we can start rethinking some of our assumptions about what different generations of employees actually want and need from their plans. For years, the benefits industry has integrated assumptions and generational stereotypes into the construction of benefits programs. So, is this wrong? Is this sustainable? Is this something that we can be, correcting? Today, I'll be discussing these questions and more with Taylor Valee, VP of Client Management with People Corporation. Taylor, how are you doing today? Welcome. Super excited to have you.
Good, thanks, Matt. Happy to be here. I'm excited to dive into this topic a little bit. It's one of my favorites.
Well, the podcast is called 18-Minute Experts. You're our expert today. But for those of you that don't know you, for those of our listeners that don't know you rather, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
For sure. I've been with People Corporation for almost 8 years now. I work on our large client management side. So working with different plan sponsors in various industries to help design programs that are not only cost sustainable, but they also have a lot of increased value perception for employees. So we'll talk a bit about that today and what that really means.
So that's fantastic because it's really a bit of a niche subject. And that's why we like to have our experts kind of drawing from these niche subjects. And, we're talking about generational labels, and I'm envisioning terms and stereotypes affiliated with, millennials, baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Z, but I'm hard pressed to kind of envision how these general labels permeate into benefits plans. Can you explain how this typically occurs?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you're right. I mean, no one's literally writing millennials dental plan or a boomer flex account.
Totally fair.
Into their contract. It's much more subtle, I would say, than that, but it does show up in how employers design or even how they communicate their programs. So, for example, I'm sure you've heard, we need more tech-based tools for Gen Z, or older employees won't use virtual care. They don't use cell phones, right, which is not true. So those assumptions drive decisions around which benefits often get prioritized. But I would say also what gets cut and even how we message them. So those stereotypes don't actually reflect behavior. And when you think about it, like a 58-year-old might be the biggest user of digital care because it's private, it's convenient.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, right? It's just kind of baked into how we've all kind of come up with people around us, right? These are influences from colleagues, coworkers, and families, kind of in a lot of multi-generational households too, and multi-generational workforces across Canada, that we kind of start to make these assumptions perhaps without realizing it. So, you've shared that the demographics, especially the generational labels, might be unpredictable, or unreliable predictors of behavior, right? For your example about a 58-year-old using the virtual care. So what are some examples of maybe the more damaging assumptions that you see other advisors or employers making or trying to make because of these labels that they're aware of?
Well, I think it goes back to even in any workplace, we see a lot of pitting generations against each other, and that never leads to collaboration. It never leads to a good thing, right? So when it comes to making plans, we need to build them on evidence rather than these caricatures of what we think people want based on their age, because age doesn't equal preference. So, Matt, I don't know if you've read The Death of Demographics.
I haven't.
Okay, highly recommend. But it's about value graphics, specifically for marketing, but it actually works for benefits as well. And it talks about how values are actually a better predictor of human behavior than age. So when it comes to someone who values, for example, financial security, They could be any age. And that's really what we should start building plans around. So yeah, back to your question on damaging assumptions. If we say, millennials only care about flexibility or boomers only want stability, we're pigeonholing people. And that won't lead to a benefits plan that everybody actually values.
Which is totally fair, right? It stands to reason when you lay it out like that. But we're in a position right now where a lot of these programs have already been built, right? We're not building a lot of them from scratch. So, you've helped us kind of understand the dangers, and I use that term loosely, right? But the dangers of making age-related assumptions when recommending or constructing a benefits plan. But, we're talking about shifting the conversation from what does Gen X want, what do millennials want, to what do people value, like you said. So how do we shift this conversation without losing the buy-in from the client and the employees? Like this is a big ask, right? To any specific client or employees to make a transition or change to their benefits plan. How do we shift that conversation?
Yeah, I think that's where curiosity can really become a strategy. So instead of telling our clients what their people want, it's about asking better questions. Sure. So I might say, before we decide what we're adding or removing or taking that benchmarking data and driving decision-making through that, let's find out what your employees actually value. So that could be, pulse polls, surveys, doing a focus group. And I always say, do a couple focus groups, get the loudest people in the room, but also get a group going with some of those quieter people and hear from them what they actually value. And you're going to see that across every age group, there's going to be differences in terms of what they value. So autonomy, belonging, security, all those things, the light bulb's going to go on in terms of what those employees are actually looking for in a benefits plan. So I'd say it's about reframing the question, especially for advisors.
I like that too, right? Because it is intuitive. How do you know what people value? You ask them, right? Mm-hmm. The flip side to it is it's a lot of work. Oftentimes I find that, group benefits advisors, whether it's from the volume of business that they're operating with or the urgency with which they operate or with, that a lot of plan administrators operate, that you don't have the time to take that step back to maybe build out a plan to have that conversation with a client. Because like you said, it could be as simple as taking the time and being proactive enough to do this. But a lot of advisors aren't doing that. Could be the difference right there, right? Is taking the time to build the plan, to have the conversations that can lead to a path forward of constructing a more effective and efficient benefits plan for the client's needs. Now, obviously, hearing right from the horse's mouth, hearing from the employees what they value and what they need is one way. Is there other ways that you can, evaluate values as an advisor other than using demographics? Is there any other data that you can use to help kind of make recommendations or to help provide guidance to a plan administrator using their plan data or claims experience for constructing a benefits plan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said there about, people don't always have the time. You think of HR and all of the different things under their umbrella of what they need to do in a day. Getting that expert is really important. So having an advisor that can lead those focus groups, those surveys, and then data. So there's a lot of insight that's actually, it's hiding in plain sight. So, utilization patterns for one, they tell a story if you know how to read them. And you don't have to be the one to know how to read them, but you need to get somebody in the room that does. So if we know mental health claims are climbing, that's going to point to values like psychological safety or well-being. If we see a lot of strong participation in budgeting tools or financial literacy, that's going to reflect a desire for preparedness, for future security. So high uptake will show you what employees value most. And in turn, low uptake tells you what employees really don't care about. So that's, I would say, one of the most important things you can do. If you don't necessarily have time for a survey yet, you can definitely look at your data.
I really like that as a jumping off point, because I would call this a project for any group benefits advisor that was looking to prospect a client or review an in-force client without diving all the way in with all the, employee sessions and, surveys and everything like that, taking a look, really observing and absorbing what's included in the utilization reports. Too often we say, oh, what, your drugs are high. What could this mean for your work? And kind of pointing the finger back at the plan sponsor or plan administrator saying, hey, listen, all these claims are a reflection of your job site, of who you have, working for you, without considering that it might be a reflection of something a bit deeper.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're kind of saying, right? Is really drill down into what this could mean in terms of what the employees care about rather than what they need because of what's going on in the workforce. And on the flip side too, Taylor, like how many times does a plan administrator or an advisor go, oh, great, you don't have any, claims for X, Y, Z, and move on and appreciate it and be happy about it without considering, hey, it's not valued, right? Why is it included in the benefits plan in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for those that are on fully insured plans, why are you paying for it?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like it's good. It's like, oh yeah, your claims are low, but not considering like, yeah, you're still paying for the premiums. They're just, going in other areas. So how can you kind of reshape the plan in order to, be more cost effective?
Yeah. And even with that, I would say the number one mistake is chasing trends instead of your organization's insights. So like when we get that benchmarking information or what are our peers doing, but we're not actually looking internally at our own people and what they're doing, that's a very common error, I would say, in terms of designing benefit programs.
So do you see that a bit more frequently where the default maybe, and not to point fingers or paint anybody with a broad brush, but that it's just easier to collect benchmarking reports that are readily available and try and use that as, the be all end all and goal for plan structure? Do you see that more frequently than advisors taking the time to really dive into the utilization of a specific group or policy?
I do think benchmarking information, now I will say it has its place, but I think sometimes it can be the easy way out. I think to design a program that's well thought out and is going to be received well, you need to look at the benchmarking, but you also need to look at your organization specifically and what those people want and what their dependents want too, right? It's not just the employee that's on the plan, it's their entire family. And I see a lot of times where employers launch, a flashy new program, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's communicated in a way from the vendor that doesn't connect emotionally with their workforce. So employees just see it as another ad, but they don't really resonate with it. So even the way that you communicate those changes needs to be aligned with the values of your employees.
So you kind of hit on a couple of things that I wouldn't, if you're able to elaborate on a little bit further.
Yeah.
Identifying what the values of a dependent are might be a little bit challenging, right? Based on the data that's provided in terms of claims. So I'd be interested in hearing how somebody like you would dive into that and evaluate value and drive results from that kind of dependent, subsection. And also with respect to like kind of the modernization of benefits. I know I'm laying a lot on you right now, Taylor, so I hope you're taking notes on my 2-part question. But the modernization, like why is that such a mistake? Why do clients tend to kind of push that out unilaterally without considering the needs of their employees? Like is it just for sake of ease?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I'll start with your dependent question so I don't forget.
Totally fair. I'll loop back to the modernization one afterwards if we do forget.
Yeah, sounds good. From a dependent standpoint, there are reporting tools that we can utilize to see what types of claims dependents, now it does depend on the size of the group, but what dependents are claiming, the average cost per certificate for certain, paramedical practitioners. We can dive in a lot more into those mid and larger size groups in terms of what dependents want. But even looking at, how many of your employees do have a dependent on their plan.
Interesting.
So if most of your workforce is single, then you're probably going to look more at benefits that resonate with those single people than you are at the more family benefits, like family counseling, for example. So really, again, informing on the data piece and understanding what your employee population looks like beyond just a generational standpoint, because you can have single people at any age.
Of course.
And families at any age, right? So
I think what I'm picking up, I've worked with group benefits advisors for a long time. I partnered with them in a variety of different capacities to try to win new business or retain, mid to large size clients. And even when you have the extra time to dedicate to a project or process like that, the group benefit space tends to follow rules, right? Like with respect to, we see this, we do this. Do you know what I mean? Like it's almost like a rule book. And what you're kind of presenting today is more of a I'm going to say relaxed approach, because I kind of feel like it is, right? You're kind of letting your mind expand and let the rule book kind of, fall by the wayside, where you're absorbing information in a different way and processing it and applying it in different ways to get different results. And obviously, if you're doing things differently like that, it's an opportunity for you to differentiate yourself as a group benefits advisor. And oftentimes, if you're trying to win new business, you're up against another advisor. So just by kind of taking this slow and methodical approach to the review of the plan, trying to identify what the group values before getting the opportunity to speak to the employees, perhaps, right? This could be a great way to just differentiate yourself from whomever the client is currently working with too.
Yeah, I think it was Einstein that said insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Heard that.
Yeah, so I think the group benefits industry has changed so much in the last decade. And we're only going to see it accelerate more. I mean, you look at how insurance carriers had to pivot from COVID to now, right?
Yeah.
Things are changing so much more frequently. I think that traditional rule book, and I always say set it and forget it benefit plan, it's no longer what plan sponsors are looking for, and it's also no longer what employees are looking for. They want to see that you as an employer can pivot, can keep up with what's going on in the world, and can support them inside and outside of work. And I think employers didn't have that responsibility before as much.
I think I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think now they really have to have a place for health. And when I say health, I mean financial, social, physical, and I'm missing one, mental. They really have to be able to support employees through all of that. And that rule book's going to change. And I think if advisors are able to pivot and keep up with it as well, they're going to do better, especially, as we see things change more and more.
Do you tend to see that perhaps, from a competitive landscape, that advisors are relying on the carriers to come out, like you mentioned, carriers pivoting and modernization and adaptations to their current offering on the carrier level? Do you feel like advisors kind of relying on that a little bit as a show of value compared to really understanding what the values are for a specific client? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think with insurance carriers, it always takes a little bit longer to be able to adapt certain things because of, the insurance behind it has to change.
Of course.
It typically happens where one insurance carrier sets the tone for the others, right? And then the others follow.
Yeah.
So I think advisors are limited to an extent in what can be offered based on those carriers. But I also think that advisors have a lot of sway or a lot of expertise that insurance carriers can use to their advantage to set them apart too. So I think the advisor can set themselves apart in trends, in how they look at data, in how they ask the right questions to their clients. But I also think that insurance carriers can learn a lot from advisors too.
So the message is, keep diving into that data, try and understand the value that, employees want to find within their plans, and then, stand up on your soapbox and scream to the insurance carriers, right? To change their offering accordingly. But realistically, that's how change is driven on the insurance side, right?
Yeah, exactly. It takes collective voices to decide on what's important, to decide what the future looks like. And I think before plan sponsors renew their plans, asking themselves, whose values is this plan actually serving? And who might it be leaving behind? So making plans that feel equitable and feel human are the ones that are going to drive the retention and the engagement.
I like that. Taylor, you've hit on a few points about kind of breaking away from the set it and forget it, right? Differentiating yourself and how you review data when prospecting or even trying to retain mid to large size clients. But as we move towards the end of the calendar year, a lot of group advisors and clients, they do some planning. It's human nature for the upcoming year, right? So as like a final piece, I'm curious, what kind of advice or guidance would you like to share to listeners when they're considering the future of their benefits plans or perhaps prospecting a larger client that's considering the future of their benefits plan?
I would say that, looking at values and modernizing your plan is not about adding more or spending more. It's about aligning things better. So you modernize by deepening relevance, not by just increasing options. And I would say it's not about keeping up with generations. We've all heard there's 5 generations in the workforce. How do we cater to them all? It's about keeping up with people in general. So when we shift from that demographics to values, we're not just building better plans. We're building better workplaces. And like I said, we're making it more real, more human.
Taylor, how powerful to finish us off, deepening relevance, right? Not just adding more. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today on 18-Minute Experts. That was fantastic.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here.
And thanks again to Taylor for spending some time with us today. I had a blast. I hope that you did too. And there you have it, folks. Another episode of 18-Minute Experts is in the books. Remember, the insights shared here are just the beginning of our journey together. To stay updated on future episodes, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. When it comes to navigating the complexities of group benefits, knowledge is power. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay empowered. Until next time, thank you for joining us on 18-Minute Experts.